Welcome, everyone. My name is Amanda Kulbaba, and I am your host today in welcoming in and speaking with the brilliant Dr. Amit Goswami, Ph.D. Dr. Goswami will be discussing his latest work and book titled The Ascent of Humanity. So excited for this, everybody. This will be just so much fun. So welcome, Dr. Goswami. Thank you for being with us today.
Glad to be here.
Before we dive into this fascinating work, I'd like to say a few words about you. Dr. Goswami, PhD, professor, researcher, best-selling author, quantum science pioneer, spiritual practitioner, is a retired professor from the physics department of the University of Oregon from 1968 to 1997. He is a renowned pioneer of the new paradigm of quantum science based on the primacy of consciousness. In 2009, Amit started a movement called quantum activism, now gaining ground in North and South America, where he has founded Quantum Academy, Europe, and India. At the same time, he has established the Center for Quantum Activism, CQA, with headquarters in USA. In 2019, he and his collaborators established an educational wing of CQA called Quantum Activism Vishwalayam, Home of the World, acting as Department of Quantum Science at the University of Technology in Jaipur, India. They developed a master program in psychology and also PhD programs in psychology, yoga, and naturopathy, economics, management, and sociology. All these are based on principles of integration of science and spirituality that Amit has developed over the years. It is an international program of transformative education. Goswami has written several groundbreaking popular books based on research on quantum science and consciousness. Amongst them, Quantum Integrative Medicine, Journey Quantum Style, The Quantum Brain, The Return of the Archetypes, Quantum Spirituality, and The Reenchantment of the Reality You Live. All of these with Valentino R. Onisur, MD. Quantum Psychology and the Science of Happiness, The Self-Aware Universe, The Quantum Doctor, Physics of the Soul, Quantum Creativity, and the Everything Answer book. His latest book, The Ascent of Humanity, has just been released. Amit was featured in the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? And the documentaries The Dalai Lama Renaissance, The Quantum Activist. His most recent documentary was launched in 2024 in Brazil, Power of the Subtle. He is a spiritual practitioner and calls himself quantum activist in search of wholeness. My first question for you, Amit, why did you decide to write The Ascent of Humanity at this time?
Well, there could not be any better time. We are in such a crisis. So to get out of the crisis is also to find our ascent that is waiting for us. The first show that both the data and the theory of biological evolution, not Darwin's theory, but an advanced theory that I have built, is suggesting that the next step of evolution beyond the rational mind will be the intuitive mind, which requires a lot of creativity. So this transition is waiting for us. Crisis is not only a danger, but also an opportunity to grow. So this is what I'm suggesting, that current crisis, actually one should not be disheartened, because there is at least a 15% of the human population that are ready for making a quantum leap in their relationship with the earth, the universe, the whole enchilada. And so these people, if they take the leadership and transform themselves, then we can get into the next level of human development, from the rational mind to the intuitive mind. This is basically the idea.
Beautiful. And there's so much in there to dive into. You mentioned this 15% who is ready. And you also mentioned the intuitive mind. And as that is the part of our next steps in evolution and development, can you describe and explain this more to us, the importance of the intuitive mind and um, in relationship to evolution and development?
Yes, I mentioned creativity. Creativity is some discovery or invention of something that is brand new with value. Things that are known to us already, things that we have already investigated, that we can think rationally, they are not creative because it's about the known. Creativity is about the unknown. And for that, we need the intuitive domain of reality. We need to have extrasensory perception. Sensory perception will not lead us to the known, unknown. The unknown can be reached only by paying attention to what is beyond the manifest. And beyond the manifest are the archetypes, the context of the what is known. When archetypes are intuited, unknown is transformed into the known. So the studying the known will get us nowhere, not in the new realms. Studying the unknown, researching the unknown, and expressing them via the known. That is the way. That is creativity. And that creativity is what we need, and that's what the basis of the intuitive mind. The intuitive mind is based on creativity.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. And you mentioned also the archetypes. Can you, and I know you've written a book on the archetypes, and we actually have spoken together over a year ago about the archetypes. But for people that this is new for, can you just briefly explain?
Yeah, archetypes are defined in religions as God's attributes. In quantum science, God is replaced by the idea of primary consciousness that is the ground of being. You can call it God, but that's just a name which confuses us. So it's better to think of the ground of being as consciousness itself. That is, the whole thing is actually our what we experience as consciousness. And when this ground of being is manifest in us, it manifests as a subject looking at object. This is what we experience. This is what we usually call consciousness, which is actually awareness. We use the word awareness. So archetypes are ideas of consciousness, exploring which we get from the ego consciousness, which is limited to conditioning, limited to the known, into the unknown, the open consciousness, the consciousness that is beyond what is known. In other words, we renew ourselves, we change ourselves, transform ourselves into somebody new in studying the archetype. And somebody that new has the attribute of consciousness as the ground of being, the whole enchilada. So archetypes are best thought of as aspects of consciousness itself, the ground of being, exploring which we get a glimpse of the ground of being. We get a glimpse of that whole consciousness.
And what are these archetypes?
So there are 9 of them. It looks like, starting from the professions we engage with, there could be more, but these 9 are right now manifest in our professions. Abundance, power, beauty, love, goodness, truth, justice, wholeness, and self. These are the 9 archetypes. Exploring which you reach the divine. In the old-fashioned language, you reach the ground of being, the non-dual consciousness.
Beautiful. Thank you for explaining that. And I think a lot of us, that 15% you mentioned, are really right now embracing and trying to work through those within ourselves to redefine, understand, and establish, a new paradigm or a new definition of what that means for ourselves and within our life. So, yes. Now, I want to go a little bit more into consciousness here because there's a couple of things in your book that I was just like sort of blown away with. And I was like, oh, that's so fascinating. Well, I know I have to back up a little bit and go step by step because there's a lot. Um, First, if you can explain briefly and easily to us, is how does quantum physics integrate science and spirituality? And you may have already just started a little bit onto this.
Okay, so we have to get into the basics of quantum physics. The quantum physics says fundamentally that quantum objects are waves. They do become particles only when we observe them. But before we observe them, they do not belong to the space-time dimension. They are outside of space and time. They live in a domain called domain of potentiality. When you observe them, then only they become particles. So the question arises, what makes them collapse into, what makes waves collapse into particles? And that collapsing agent is consciousness. Consciousness chooses, and therefore the many-faceted object that the wave is, when one facet is chosen, it becomes a particle. That's the mystery of wave-particle duality. The consciousness, the basic characteristic of consciousness is non-locality. Non-locality means that objects in consciousness, if correlated, they can communicate instantly at any distance. Non-locality, not using local signals. Signals are not needed. So this basic concept of non-locality of consciousness takes us beyond what we ordinarily think of as ego consciousness, which is concerned only with the local stuff, only with the known stuff, only with what we can reach with sensory signals. Non-local, beyond that, beyond all that. Yes.
Oh, we just
Consciousness science.
lost you there a little bit. Okay. So, for me and for my brain in understanding, I'm sure everybody else is getting this maybe. So, when we are looking at our own world right here, in the past, our consciousness has been very much ego-driven, self, um, and what we see, what we know, what we've known. And now with this intuitive mind and the ascent of humanity, our consciousness is expanding to connect with the unknown, to bring that in. And also with quantum physics, what I've known, and this goes back to when you spoke in What the Bleep Do We Know? That my understanding is that being the observer, when you have always all these possibilities around you, and then when you observe one thing, everything collapses into that one possibility, that one direction. Am I like, is that correct, or am I completely off?
Well, consciousness is the ground of being in which all objects exist as possibilities to choose from. When possibilities collapse, we get objects that are concrete, that are particles. Yes, you are completely right. So
Okay.
this is the very basis of very basic of quantum science. Consciousness is the ground of being instead of matter ground of being. This is the paradigm that current science proposes. It's wrong. It has been proven wrong experimentally. Matter is everything. Philosophy is very limited philosophy. It can only deal with the known. It cannot deal with creativity, the unknown. So, but there are many unknown things that are manifest in us. In fact, our future is about unknown things, things we have not discovered yet. That is why we are stuck with this crisis. Crisis suggests that things are not working. Things are not working because you are using only the limited knowledge that ego is capable of exploring. ego cannot explore the new. We have to go beyond the ego's rational mind into the intuitive mind, for which we need the touch of the non-dual consciousness, the non-local consciousness, one without a second. And this one, when we study it, when we explore it through studying the archetypes, exploring the archetype, embodying the archetypes, then we get into the intuitive mind, then we get into ability of thinking beyond the ego. What that means is that I not only think of myself, I also think about you when I make a decision, when I make an attempt to discover something, when I explore something. I not only think about my own, what will it bring to me, what is in it for me, I also think about you, what is in it for you, what is in it for humanity, what is in it for the planet, what is in it for the good of the planet. And this is necessary. You see everywhere people are being selfish. What translates into it is that they are polluting the environment, they're destroying the environment without thinking the consequences to the rest of humanity. So we have global climate change, which is now a major factor in every country. We have more floods than ever before. We have hurricanes like never before. We have every domain that you look up, environment, pollution, of course. Carbon is a main problem, how to solve the carbon problem, greenhouse effect, global warming. So how to solve this problem? We have to think of the planet as our home, planet as ourselves. Our interests must align with the interest of the planet. This is what the intuitive mind enables us to do. With the rational mind, we always rationalize. All people can take care of themselves. Earth can take care of itself. You know, we think all things will just take care of themselves and we can do whatever we want. This is the philosophy of the ego. And this philosophy got to be abundant in favor of a philosophy that suggests, that welcomes the intuitive mind, that welcomes creativity.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. That's very, very clear. And I myself too, I don't know about everybody else, but over this past summer, I've been seeing very much of a split. I've had very much many experiences where I've seen people working from the heart center, working from a place of compassion and the archetypes, basically, very much supporting everybody where they didn't have to. It wasn't necessary, but this overflowing of compassion and support and love. And then I've had extreme opposites. I've seen people where they could have helped others and have chosen not to, and basically said, this doesn't affect me, so why should I bother? And I am seeing that this split in the world right now of I do think we are ascending, but there is definitely a group of people still struggling and still with that ego. And then, yes, other people are, whether they realize it or not, are embracing that heart center, those archetypes, and that intuitiveness. And yeah, it's quite fascinating to observe it and then take it in for yourself. Like, where do you fit into this? So
Yeah,
thank you for all of this. Yeah.
the heart is the thing. The heart is where we receive the message of the archetypes. It's not only in the brain that we receive. Yes, the intuitive thought is important to us also, but it's the intuitive feeling. And thought plus feeling gives us positive emotion. That positive emotion, intuitive thought plus intuitive feeling that we feel in the heart. The thought we think in the brain, but the feeling we feel in the heart. And this combination, this positive emotion, combination that we call goodness, combination that we call love, these positive emotions are the basis on which we overcome the ego's main problem, which is negative emotion. Negative emotions are built into the brain, which people used to call evil. It is built into our brain. We cannot help being evil occasionally. All of us have that tendency, but we can control the tendency. We can balance the tendency with having positive emotions. So this positive emotions, getting into positive emotions is essential. Rationality cannot take us out of negative emotions. We fall prey to negativity every time the stress becomes bigger. Small stress we can handle by rationality, but big stressful event we cannot handle. And when we cannot handle, we succumb to negative emotion, we succumb to selfishness, we destroy the earth in the process without even noticing that we are doing it, without even being aware that my action is severely limiting other people's enjoyment of the world. This is the thing. And without the heart, we could not do this. Without the heart representing the feelings, manifesting the feelings that comes from the archetypes. Archetypes gives us both feelings, positive feelings, and also positive thinking. Positive thinking we can handle with the brain. And that's still a creative step. That is, rational mind cannot get positive thinking. Rational mind can only do thinking on the known. It's very limited positive thinking. But positive thinking of the new, that requires going beyond rational mind. So intuitive mind, intuitive thinking is important. But when we say mind here, we are including the feelings as well. Mind is the more general term we are using for consciousness. It's really what we mean is intuitive consciousness. Intuitive consciousness with both the brain, mind, and the heart.
Beautiful. And yes, I want to go to that. I have a question because I remember reading. Um, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes quickly. Um, I remember reading within your book about how our brain is set up more, and I might be getting this wrong. I know I have it written here, in regards to more um, negative emotions. Um, am I saying that correctly? Can you talk a bit about that?
Brain is set up with negative emotions. That is correct.
Yes.
Then
Okay.
brain has three different layers, one over the other over the other. In our core, that's the reptilian brain. And we have a middle brain, that's also called limbic brain because it's like limbs over the reptilian brain. And then we have the cortex. Cortex is the brain where we think, but it's the limbic brain, it's the midbrain where the negative emotions are. And this midbrain controls us whenever we fall prey to stress. It's just a survival thing. The negative emotions came from the survival instinct of animals. This is our inheritance from the animal kingdom. We are animals to some extent, but we can rise beyond it. This is where animals could not go. Animals could not develop positive emotions, but we can develop positive emotions because we can develop the heart. So
And sorry, I just wanted to say you also mentioned in your book the midbrain has a chakra. Can you explain that?
chakras are places where we feel feelings. Conventionally, people only think of 7 chakras. At the bottom, root chakra, sex chakra around the sexual organs, then navel chakra around the digestive organs, heart chakra around heart and the immune system, thymus gland, throat chakra around the expressive organs, then the brow chakra about the brain, the thinking part of the human existence, and then crown chakra. This tells us, is the body okay or not? Body looking okay, mainly about the looks of the body, how the body feels to me. This is why we go and see ourselves in the mirror every chance we get. You have noticed the tendency. If we see a reflecting surface, we have to go and look at it to see how am I looking. So these are the 7 conventional chakras. But when we study animals, we find that animals do cognize. Animals meaning mammals. Mammalian animals can cognize. They can see the meaning of something. How do they cognize? How do they see meaning in something? This is not rational meaning. This is not meaning by thinking. This is meaning by feeling. Feeling also can be expressed in terms of like and dislike. And that leads to a cognition as well, because I can distinguish between what is this is I like, and this is I don't like because it does not feel good to me. That distinction is cognition. So mammals cognize, which means that the mammals don't have a cortex, a very little cortex, very little, and that is not enough to think. So how do mammals cognize? How does a cow cognize? How does a cat cognize? They cognize through their midbrain. So therefore, midbrain must have the ability of experience, which means that the midbrain must be where consciousness embodies itself and experiences itself as a self, separate from objects. This is what gives us the midbrain self.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting. And you also mentioned too in your book how people are not aware of themselves anymore. They're not in their body. There's no awareness of that. Can you discuss that with us for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, some people are. Generally, what we find is that there is an instinct, positive instinct called altruism, helping a person who is in need of my help. Altruism. Altruism is a representation of the archetype of goodness. I'm being good to the other. If a person needs help, I'm going to be good to him, good to her. This is the idea. But this altruism instinct is only for 40% of humanity today. 40% of humanity do not have altruism. And that is the basic problem. The evidence is more and more suggesting that altruism is not for everyone. Altruism is only for part of humanity, about 40%. And the other 40% don't have any idea what the other person needs or what the other person is there at all. If there is such a thing as another person, they objectify everybody. Everybody is for my sensory satisfaction, my pleasure satisfaction only. This objectification makes people narcissistic. You see narcissistic people all around you because this 40% of people are that way. So this is the part of the problem because, how are you going to teach this 40% that, look, the world is important, humanity, the rest of humanity is also important. It's not just about you. Everything is not about you. Very hard. We have to start in their childhood to change from the beginning. Parents have to take special care that they learn to develop a tendency of helping people who are in need. That tendency comes naturally to only 40% of our kids, not the rest of them. The rest of them has to be taught. And this is what we are neglecting.
That's fascinating. That's very interesting. And um, you you talk. This is a good opening where I want to go back in my notes a little bit here because we sort of jumped ahead, but it's been so fascinating and very interesting. But you talk about reincarnation. How do the laws of consciousness and evolution include reincarnation? Would this understanding of this help us with what we're trying to figure out here in altruism and teaching others? Yes, I'll give that to you.
Yeah, this reincarnation is very, very important. And to understand it, you have to really, really go deep into a little bit into the biological evolution itself. Evolution, everybody knows as Darwin's theory. Darwin's theory, survival of the fittest, has two elements, genes and environmental selection, natural selection. So genes are the objects which can change by mutation. So these gene mutations produce many new possibilities, out of which nature selects which ones are good. And those are the ones that survive and changes a species into another species when there are sufficient new features that appear. This is basically Darwin's theory. And on what basis nature chooses? Nature selects. Nature selects on the basis of what is good for survival of the thesis. Only survivability counts. Genes are the hereditary aspect of the organism. Genes are inherited. Any changes of genes will be inherited by the people who follow the progeny. But there is another theory besides Darwin's theory called Lamarckian theory, given by a biologist named Lamarck. This Lamarckian theory, inheritance of acquired characteristic, characteristics that I have learned during my lifetime. In other words, during our lifetime, what changes in our body, genes don't change anymore. Genes are forever fixed. That's what I inherited. But what changes are the proteins in the body. They continuously change, and this change is reflected in how the body grows, the various organs. They first grow and then they start declining. All of these are changes in the proteins. Lamarck is saying that the changes in the proteins also propagate somehow. But nobody could figure out how they can propagate because they cannot propagate from the genes. The proteins have no effect on the genes. And the genes are the only hereditary mechanism in the material plane. And so this is where people were stuck. In this book, I have shown that no, there is besides the material plane just defines the hardware. But besides that, there is also software. And this software, the part where we inject feelings and meanings, that what we get from software, this software can be inherited via the idea of reincarnation. Reincarnation is an inheritance of the software. The hardware does not go from one body to another. We are really born in a new body. But the software that we create in this life is non-local, outside of space and time. It's non-local memory, resides outside of space and time. And because it resides outside of space and time, anybody in the future can, in principle, inherit my software that I have created in this life. This is how reincarnation works. It's the propagation of non-local memory. So reincarnation is essential to explain how the Lamarckian part of evolution, because there's plenty of evidence in favor of Lamarckism, that yes, like instincts cannot be explained on Darwinian theory. How do instincts generate or propagate? Instincts are about software, they're not about hardware. How does the software propagate? And this is where Lamarckism comes in. This is where non-local memory comes in. This is where reincarnation comes in. So reincarnation is the only explanation of how development, Lamarckian evolution, is equally important as Darwinian evolution. It's a combination of both. Evolution is evolution plus development, Lamarckian evolution.
That's really fascinating. And like from my perspective, like when I do my own like meditation and my own work, like sometimes I'll say to myself, like, my future, if I call on my future self to support me right now because everything is done. Like it's all happened. So if I can pull on my future self to support me right now and to give me the information I need right now, it's like it's the same, like it's all done. And what I would also ask you too, this is just, my own thoughts, is for the people who are ready right now. So for the people, that 15% who are moving more into the intuitive mind and working more on these archetypes, would you say that their development and evolution, from like their of this theory of reincarnation, they are more developed and more evolved than others. And that's where maybe the difference is here.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, that is the thing. They have developed altruism, and beyond that, they have developed compassion. Beyond altruism, they have developed the capacity to love. They have developed even the capacity of exploring higher archetypes like truth, like justice. So this is the thing. Without the reincarnational maturity, people are just not ready. I mentioned before people who do not have even altruism. How can they be just to another person? How can they be truthful? Because they have no concept of anything but what is good for me, what is in it for me. Everything is transactional to these people, narcissism. So how to go beyond narcissism is a huge challenge. Of course, the reincarnational maturity we cannot give to people, but some of it, because it's software, it can be learned by changing the proteins in this life. This is what education is about. Up till now, until very recently, we always had some moral education. And this moral education held the society together. For example, take the American society, there are certain ideals that makes you American. Today, America is not that America anymore. Nobody shares ideals. Ideals are still valued by this 15% that I keep mentioning, but the rest of them, there are no ideals. People are mixed up, thoroughly mixed up about what the values are. Now, you agreed, some people follow religious values and they are not, some of them are okay, some of the religious values are okay. Some of them are very prejudicial, like homosexuality, religions have very prejudicial opinion about that. But some of the values, like be good to others, that's common to all religions. So religious values is part of the story that maybe another 15-20% follow religious values. But really, bulk of humanity today, more than 50%, have no concept of values, archetypal values. And because of this lack, people are so selfish. They absolutely blindly keep on destroying the environment, creating crisis, destroying democracy, creating crisis, destroying the basic capitalism, destroying economy. And this is what the current crisis is about. There is no common thing in people anymore. There is no way that we can define an American. It's all very different things for different people. And most of it is just selfish. And therefore is the problem. How do we bring in values which will unite a country's people into some common goals so that we can have one people? And if we do it for all of humanity, then we got one humanity. That's the goal. And we can do that. We can do that following quantum science. We can do that by exploring consciousness itself, by realizing that matter is not the ground of being, consciousness is, and therefore we must go beyond this personal ego consciousness into that consciousness which makes us whole, which produces balance of positive and negative, and makes us whole. It
Yes.
integrates our being.
Beautiful. That's so you just beautifully express it. It's perfect. And this I need to ask you because this sort of blew my mind a bit in understanding it. And I really, this is a big one. So for me, anyways, but I think people will be very interested. So this question is, how does quantum physics enable us to verify the idea of oneness of consciousness?
Yeah. So I went through some of it already. Domain of potentiality, where the waves reside. I said that domain of potentiality is non-local. And I use the word correlation. When two objects, quantum objects, are correlated, what does it mean to correlate? Correlation requires a local interaction. So they come close together, then they interact, and they become correlated. Correlated is correlation, or it is also called sometimes by other names, but we'll use correlation. And you can use the word entanglement, which is also used. What does it mean? It means that two objects can communicate instantly at any distance. Okay? No signal is required. But you can only communicate with yourself instantly. So therefore, what has happened is that these two objects, they're not really different anymore. They have acquired a unity. Okay. So in this domain of potentiality, any two objects can be correlated, and any two objects can become potentially one. So there's a potential oneness in this object, in this domain of potentiality. This domain is a potentiality. Domain of potentiality is a domain of oneness, potential oneness. And this potential oneness is what is consciousness, because from this comes the subject-object split experience. Consciousness arises when we measure. Not only we see the object, we also see ourselves as the subject, the observer. The observer sees the object. Okay, and notice how this integrates science and spirituality, because spiritual traditions are always saying there is oneness, transcendent oneness, oneness that transcends the ego. Now we are seeing that, yes, the oneness is the one that chooses among the potentialities to make waves into particles. So oneness is an essential component of quantum physics. Quantum physics cannot be understood fully without oneness, without this one consciousness. And therefore, science and spirituality has to be integrated under quantum physics.
Thank you for that again. So I guess like it's just everything sort of coming together. So when we talk about consciousness as of oneness, I'm just trying to relate this to us here. Um, because I think where my brain is going a little bit is the oneness versus separation here. You know, we have been very much programmed, conditioned, manipulated into feeling separate. We're all separated from each other. And what quantum physics is really explaining amazingly well is how we are all one and what that truly means and how we receive from the non-local, that hidden information through the intuitive mind. So I'm bringing that all together. Like I'm describing this correctly, coming together in this way, and even the reincarnation aspect too. That's also the consciousness of oneness and how we can work through with these archetypes, and also realizing that we are all connected. Um, and that also explains too when we talk about the collective consciousness, where there's if somebody learns something, let's say, in the Middle East or Australia, then the other person in North America gets it too. Is that the same energy that we're talking about here? Is that correct?
The collective unconscious is shared by everyone, every part of humanity. That already suggests that this domain of potentiality is shareable by all humanity. We are all connected, or we are all connected if we look at the collective part of the unconscious, not just guided by the personal unconscious, which is of my own personal memory. Where does this love come to the mother? Mother has to love the child. Most mothers do. Where does it come from? It comes from the collective unconscious. It's in our collective memory. That collective software, non-local software that I was talking about, that we reincarnate with, that's in the collective memory, collective unconscious. So the collective consciousness, that the one that we share with people in Australia, in India, in Europe, and in America, everywhere, this is the convincing fact that should convince everybody that we are beyond the ego. Ego is the result of conditioning. When we manifest consciousness directly, embody consciousness directly in the brain, in the present, this is why meditation is so important. We do not see ourselves as a separate person. We see ourselves as one with everyone. We very seldom have this oneness of everything experience, but I had And many people have. Maslow used to call it peak experience. It is not as uncommon as people think. Many people have this peak experience where they see that I am more than just myself. I look at a sunset and see beauty in it. And at that moment, I could love everybody. That is the oneness of everything that I'm talking about. So many people have that. So it is nothing that is too foreign to us, and we should all be able to do it. Ego is the result of conditioning. What happens is that memory, we recollect again and again and again, and this reflection in the mirror of memory makes the quantum self into the ego, very personal, very separate ego. But this is not all. By looking at the collective unconscious, by meditating and going deep into present-centeredness, we can achieve that connectivity again with others. Love is part of that connectivity. Love is to care for another, and that takes us beyond me. Goodness is about connectivity because it takes us beyond me. If I'm compassionate to someone, if I'm helping someone in distress, then that takes from me into the other, recognizes the other, and enables me to help the other. So this otherness of other, when you recognize that, when you respect that, that's what we are looking for. That's the oneness we are looking for. And that is where we belong. We also need the ego. Ego is not completely an unnecessary tool. We need the ego because the ego needs to learn and make a large number of known things, because the ego has to express the unknown. Creativity requires both consciousness, the unknown consciousness, the new consciousness, as also the old, because the old has to make representations of the new. It's like, how do we write down a new idea? I have to write down in language. The language is old. Language has already been part of the language of the ego. So we need the ego, but we also need the quantum self. We need the non-local self to get new ideas, to get ESP. Ego is not limited. Ego is only sensory, capable of sensory stimuli, appreciating those. But this quantum self is how we explore the new, non-local stimuli, extrasensory stimuli that directly comes from consciousness, that does not come from matter. So we need both. This is the idea that really is central to people. We need both non-locality and locality. We need both continuity and discontinuity. Creativity is a quantum leap. We need that discontinuity. We also need the conventional continuous expressions that representation, making a representation needs from us. And this needing both is the idea. We have to become whole again. When we become just the ego, we are separated. We are not whole anymore. When we bring in the quantum self in our equation, then we are whole once again. Quantum self plus the ego.
Beautiful, thank you. And I want to talk about the wholeness. You know, what is the quantum? I mean, maybe that's exactly what you just explained to us, but what is the quantum way of wholeness? Is there anything you'd like to add about that? Because that wholeness is what I think we're all trying to attain right now or move towards.
Yeah, it is not just a quantum self ego wholeness. It is also wholeness between men and women, how men cognize and women cognize. Men are centered in the navel and the brain, but women are centered more in the heart. So this is a male-female dichotomy. That too has to be integrated. And then we have inner-outer dichotomy. Some people are inner directed, introvert people, some people are extrovert, outer directed. That also has to be integrated. Both inner and outer are important. Similarly, there are archetypal dichotomy, like good evil. We have negative emotional brain circuits. We have to make positive emotional brain circuits and balance that. So that's part of wholeness as well. We have similarly truth, lie, beauty, ugly, all kinds of archetypal dichotomies. They all have to be integrated. So wholeness is an integration of all the dichotomies that we fall prey to. Okay. When there is
Beautiful, yes.
no more conflict. We live in a conflictive world, and that's really ultimately how to get world peace. World peace is not just a meaningless phrase that we toss around. Oh, we would love to have world peace. We cannot get world peace unless we are whole. Humanity has become extremely separated by these dichotomies.
Yes, I see that. I totally agree. I think within my own mind too, as I see it, is that we need to balance ourselves. But I think it's the same thing. What you've been talking about with wholeness is that we're, separated, or we see ourselves separated. We have convinced ourselves that we are separated, but we're not. And we have to shift that perspective and understanding to bring ourselves back into a balance and a wholeness. And I think too, what you're talking about, the males and females, I think that's why so many people out there talk about like balancing and understanding the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. What does that mean, really? What is that about? Because we're not working within the sacredness of either.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, when we say sacred feminines or sacred male, we are talking about wholeness. We are really saying that, okay, we are not just the heart, just the navel, just the brain. We all have to be integrated, all have to work together in a coherent way. And that is the way to become whole. So wholeness is to get rid of all conflicts. It's the separateness that creates conflict, dichotomy that creates conflict. We have to go beyond all the dichotomies so that we are able to live in a conflict-free way. And that is wholeness. And this wholeness is really the objective of human life, to become whole again. We become separate, we come from oneness, but become separate because of necessity of manifestation. And conditioning is necessary in order to, as I said, creativity has two components, the new but the expression has to be in terms of the old. So you have to develop old programs. So conditioning is necessary. Conditioning produces forgetfulness. So you have to remember once again and then integrate the new and the old, the transcendental, the male and the female, good and evil, all this stuff that you're talking about. Then we are whole and our objective is done. We are enlightened.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This has been so fascinating. We are running out of time, but there's so much in Dr. Goswami's book, The Ascent of Humanity, so rich with really understanding this from a quantum science perspective, as well as just from what's going on in society right now and within yourself. So thank you so much. And before we start to finish up, please let everybody know where we can find you online, what you're doing, what other projects are coming up for you. And of course, if you have any more last words of wisdom for us, we would love to hear it.
Okay, so first way to reach me is my website, amitgoswami.org, AMITGOSWAMI, one word, .org, amitgoswami.org. That's my website. You can write to me, info@amitgoswami.org, email address. And we tend to every email that reaches us. Okay, now the important project that right now occupies much of my time is the master's and PhD program that Amanda already talked about. And this program is a transformational education program. If you want to learn about psychology, about healing, about management, really we cannot do this without the idea of these ideas that we are talking about, without these ideas of consciousness being the ground of being and how consciousness manifests. We require a new way of looking at a new worldview. We cannot talk about it then psychology without consciousness. Consciousness has to be looked upon as the ground of being before we can talk about psychology properly or talk about healing properly, talk about even management properly. So this is the important thing. We want you to integrate yourself, come and without some experience, Without the transformational component, without doing some yoga, doing some meditation, you cannot really get into psychology, get into healing. So we teach that as well. It's a transformational education that you are going to get. So this is where I want to invite all of you, if you can. The ones that are listening to this program are all ready because you like this kind of ideas. And you're very welcome to join us together. Together we can build intuitive mind. We can become whole.
Beautiful. Thank you so much once more. And yes, everybody who is listening to this is part of that 15%, is part of that developing the intuitive mind and working on the wholeness. So we are working to better this planet, Mother Earth, and create better, healthier, loving connections with all of us. And even the ones who are not quite ready, who are not open, we need to support them. We need to educate. We
We need
have a
to
lot.
educate. Yes. We are not
Yes.
leaving behind anybody. We need to educate. Yes.
Yes, that's so important. So thank you for everything you're doing. It is so important. So please, everybody, check out Dr. Amit Goswami's website and their programs if this resonates with you. And once more, thank you so much for taking your time today and sharing all your words of wisdom. They're so powerful, and I think they have really helped to support us in our journey and understanding consciousness and where we're going and what we're doing. And that, yeah, we do have a bright future. We can do this. We can create a so much happier, healthier world out there. So thank you so much. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I want to thank our audience, our listeners for being with us today. Thank you so much. I really do hope this has supported you and given you some clarity, insight in your own transformative journey in this world right now. And please let us know how what you thought, how you felt about this. And please reach out to us. You're always welcome to share your thoughts, questions, with myself or Dr. Goswami, please do not hesitate. So thank you all once more. Have a beautiful, lovely day. So much love and light to you all.